The rum came round at 4 in the morning, and that was how you knew. It came in a stone jar with 3 letters on the side. S-R-D. It stood for Supply Reserve Depot, but nobody ever said that. We said it meant seldom reaches destination or soon runs dry, and we said it every single time. And every single time somebody laughed, because that is what you do at 4 in the morning when your hands are cold. The sergeant poured it into the lid of a mess tin and you drank it standing up. It went down your throat like a lit match. And then you stood there in the dark with your back against the wall of the trench, and you waited for it to be light. And you did not talk very much. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I was not brave. I have read the things people wrote afterwards about how we went singing, and I do not know who they were watching. I was 17 years old and I was frightened, and so was every man in that trench, and we all pretended we were not, and that pretending is the closest thing to courage I ever saw. My name was Albert. I was born in a mill town in the north of England, in a street where every house was the same house, and the mill whistle went at 5:30, and if you were not out of the door by 6, you were docked a quarter of an hour. My father worked in the mill. My mother worked in the mill. I went into the mill at 13, sweeping under the looms while they were still running, because that is what the small boys did. You learned to read lips in there, because you could not hear a thing over the noise. 40 years later, my mother still could not hear properly, and neither could most of that street. So when I say I went to the war, I want you to know what I was leaving. I was 15 when I joined. In September of 1914, there was a table set up outside the town hall, and a man behind it with a book, and a queue of lads down the length of the market square. Half of them I knew by name. Some of them I had gone to school with. They called it a pals battalion. The idea was that if you joined together with the men from your own street and your own works, you would serve together, and it would be less strange. It worked. That was the trouble with it. It worked exactly as they said it would. The man behind the table asked my age. I said 19. Because 19 was the age you had to be to go out to France, and every lad in that queue knew it. He looked at me for about as long as it takes to blink, and he wrote 19 in the book, and he told me to step to the left. He knew. Of course he knew. I was 5'4", which was under the height as well, and I had never shaved in my life. But there was a queue behind me, and there was a number he was supposed to reach, and so he wrote 19, and he did not measure me, and that was that. Why did I go? People ask that now as if the answer must be complicated. It was not complicated. I went because everyone I knew was going. I went because the recruiting posters were on every wall, and they were very good posters. I went because a man in our chapel had said from the pulpit that this was a war for small countries against bullies, and I believed him. And I still think he believed it himself. But mostly I went because of the mill, because I could see the whole of my life from where I was standing, and it was that street and that whistle and going deaf by 50. And here was a thing happening that was bigger than the street, and I was being asked, personally, to come and be part of it. They said it would be over by Christmas. I have heard it argued since that nobody truly believed that, and I dare say the older men did not. But it was said the way people say a thing they would like to be true, and at 15 you cannot tell the difference. What I remember is standing in that queue and being worried, actually worried, that we would miss it. The first thing that did not match was the noise, not the guns. The guns came later. It was the noise of the boat, and the noise of the trains, and the noise of thousands of men who all sounded like home, and then getting off the train in France, and it being quiet, farmland, cows, somebody working in a field a mile off who did not look up. We marched towards the line for 2 days through country where nothing had happened, And then the country started to change, in stages, the way weather changes. First, there were houses with the roofs off. Then there were houses with nothing but the front wall standing, so you could see the wallpaper. And I remember looking at that wallpaper and thinking, somebody chose that. And then we came up into the trenches at night, because you always went up at night. And I smelled it for the first time. I do not know how to describe it to you properly. It was chloride of lime, which they put down everywhere, and it caught in the back of your throat. It was the latrines. It was wet chalk, which has a smell of its own, cold and mineral. It was cordite, and underneath all of that there was something else, and nobody told you what it was, because nobody had to. The old hands said you stopped noticing it after a week. They were right. But then you would go back for a rest, 10 miles behind the line, and you would sleep in a barn and eat a hot meal. And when you came back up, the smell would be waiting for you at the same place in the communication trench, like a man standing there. Now I should tell you what the war was actually like, because it was not what you think. It was mostly digging. I have seen the pictures they show now, and it is always men going over the top. And it is always the worst minute of the worst day. But the arithmetic of it was different. Your battalion went into the front line for a few days, then back into support, then into reserve, then out to rest, and round again. Most of your war was carrying things: duckboards, sandbags, wire, water in petrol tins that made the water taste of petrol. You carried them up at night, along a trench, in the rain, and then you carried something else back. We ate bully beef, which is tinned corned beef, and after a while you could not look at it. We ate mekonochi stew, which was turnip and carrot in a sort of grease, and which was decent enough hot and a punishment cold, and it was usually cold. We had hard biscuits that you could not bite. You broke them with your entrenching tool and soaked them in tea. And we had plum and apple jam. Always plum and apple. Never strawberry. Never anything else. In such quantities and for so long that it became a joke that ran the whole length of the British Army. Men wrote songs about it. I have not eaten it since, and I am not going to. The lice were the worst of the small things. Everyone had them, officers as well, and there was no getting rid of them, only keeping the number down. You would sit with your shirt inside out and run a candle flame along the seams, and you could hear them pop, that sound, and men laughing about that sound in the middle of everything else. Rats got fat. I will leave that there. You learned their guns like you learn birds. A whiz-bang was their light field gun, and it arrived at the same moment as its own noise, so there was nothing to be done about it. The big ones you could hear coming for whole seconds, and those seconds were long. We called one sort a Jack Johnson after the boxer because of the black smoke. But here is the thing nobody tells you. What frightened us was not the noise. It was when the noise stopped, because a barrage lifting meant something was about to happen. And when the barrage lifted on the 1st of July, 1916, at 7:30 in the morning, we knew exactly what was about to happen, because they had spent a week telling us. The guns had been firing since the 24th of June. It was meant to be 5 days, and the weather made it 7. Something like 1.5 million shells. We could not sleep, and we did not care, because every single one of those shells was ours. An officer stood on a box and told us the wire would be cut. He told us the German front line would be destroyed, and the men in it would be dead, and that our job was to walk across and take possession of it. He gave us to understand we would hardly need our rifles. He had been told all of it himself, and he believed it. And that matters to me, because he went over with us and he did not come back either. We believed it too. That is the part I have never been able to explain to anyone since. On the last night, men were talking about what they would do in Bapaume. Some of the lads had cut their hair. There was a feeling in that trench, in the dark, that we were about to be part of the day the war turned. They started the rum at 4. At 7:20, a mine went up on our right. I felt it come through my boots before I heard it, and a column of chalk went up and hung there, white against the sky, for what seemed like a very long time. At 7:30, the whistles went. I am not going to describe to you what happened in the next hour, partly because there are things I will not put into words for a stranger, and partly because I could not tell you very much, even if I wanted to. I remember the wire not being cut. I remember that clearly, because it was the one thing we had been promised. And there it was, still standing. And a man beside me said something about it that was almost polite. I got about 40 yards. I lay in a shell hole with my face in the chalk for the rest of that day. There were 3 of us in it by the afternoon, and only 2 of us talking. When it was dark enough, I came back, and the man who could still walk came back with me, and the 3rd one did not. They tell me that, on that one day, the British Army had something close to 57,000 casualties, and around 19,000 men were killed. The worst day in the history of the British Army, before or since. I did not know any of that at the time. Nobody in a shell hole knows what is happening 200 yards away, let alone along 18 miles of front. What I knew was the roll call. That is what I would tell you about, if you only had time to hear one thing, not the whistles, the roll call afterwards. Because a PAL's battalion is men from one town, and so when they read the names out, and there was no answer, and no answer, and no answer, the men not answering were not strangers. They were the lad from 2 doors down. They were the 2 brothers who worked in the same shed as my father. They were the boy who had sat next to me at school and had been better at sums than me and never let me forget it. We had been so pleased in 1914 that we were going to serve together. I went home in 1919. I was 20 years old, and I had a limp that I still have. The street was the same street. The whistle went at 5:30. My mother had put a photograph of me in uniform on the mantelpiece, taken before we went out, and I did not like looking at it, because the boy in it did not know anything. They asked me what it had been like at first. I said it was bad. They said yes, it must have been. And then somebody put the kettle on, and after a while they stopped asking, and I was glad. There was no version of it I could have handed over that would not have been either a lie or a cruelty. Here is what I want you to take away, if you take anything. We were not lions, and we were not fools. We were ordinary. We were men from a street who believed the thing we were told by people who also believed it. And we went. And most of us did our job. And a great many of us did not come back. And the town I came from lost, in one morning, a whole generation of the men who would have run it. There is a memorial in the market square now, more or less where the table was in 1914. The same square. About 20 feet from where a man wrote 19 in a book and told me to step to the left. I go and stand there sometimes. I read the names, and I can put a face to nearly every one, and a street, and usually a joke. I was 17. They were not much older. If you want to hear another one of these, there are others on this channel. Each one is a different person and a different war, because it was never only one war. Thank you for listening. That is really all I wanted. Somebody to listen.